evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. Great to be with you an hour earlier than usual at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. Again, announced that on social media. If you didn't catch that, I apologize. We got a great show for you guys tonight, okay? Davante Adams, trade rumors. Matter of fact, they're not just rumors. They're reports. Tay wants out of Vegas. And by the way, for good reason, we'll get into that briefly. But more so, to me, there are two and only two clear and obvious destinations where Davante Adams will end up before this trade deadline, which is in about 7 weeks or so. Get into that, as well as carving up the context, the late, great Pete Rose, who passed away. Matter of fact, the news broke during the show on Monday. I was shocked, I'm sure, as everybody else was, that it happened, when it did and whatnot. Wanted to dive deeper into, we talk about, why he's not in the Hall of Fame because of the gambling and all that. To me, it goes even deeper than that. I'll detail that in about a half hour from now. Bryson's best 10, my top 10 teams in the National Football League going into Week 5. Very excited to get into that today, as well as predictions for tomorrow night's matchup to kick off Week 5 between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Really good Thursday night game, by the way. I mean, kudos to the NFL. I remember when they came out with that TNF schedule in May. It was like, okay, some of these Thursday night games have been really, really bad. So the NFL seems to be putting more of an emphasis on putting together the best on television product, especially in standalone games that they possibly can. So I'll predict that at the end of the show. Before we get into sports, so I did want to mention happy birthday, Dad. I love you. I appreciate you. Those that are new to the show may not know that. I always say the name of the show, Carving It Up, came from my sister. Some of the ideas that's went into the show has come from my mom. And the idea of me doing a podcast at all literally came from my dad almost 5 years ago, probably close to the day at this point, because we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary in a few weeks. So shout out to Dad. Happy birthday. Hope we can make it really special for you. And I love you so much. Let's get into sports now. But first, man, so y'all know I'm a Steelers fan, or at least those that have watched the show for any period of time know I'm a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But I've taken on, going back to last season, or really 2 off seasons ago, if we want to be more specific, I've taken on like an adoptive team. Someone I'm really, really going to pull for in basically every game they play, unless they were to match up against my Steelers, and that is the mighty Detroit Lions. And before we get into anything, hey, Coach Campbell, Dan Campbell, what'd y'all do on Monday Night Football, the Seattle Seahawks?
Kneecap.
Caps were bitten in Detroit, Michigan. The Lions beat the Seahawks 42-29 in an offensive, skill contest extravaganza between these two teams. Geno Smith was really good, 395 through the air, right? A touchdown. Kenneth Walker, 3 touchdowns on the ground. But the story of the night was that Detroit Lions offense, be it in the running game where they ran for $116 collectively, be it Jared Goff, who, by the way, how's 18 for 18, 292, 2 touchdowns throwing. By the way, catching a touchdown from Amon-Ra St. Brown on a beautifully run trick play. By the way, great throw by a wide receiver, St. Brown, and a great catch over the shoulder by a quarterback, Jared Goff. No gloves involved. Listen, he didn't need gloves in that situation. Good call by Ben Johnson. But finish off on Goff, though. QBR 0 to 100 of 95 and a passer rating. I don't know how he didn't have a perfect passer rating. Maybe it was the safety at the end, but a passer rating, it's hard to do much better than this, 155.8. So Jared Goff essentially played a perfect game. And it's funny. We did a segment. Obviously, I'm live on the Grid Network's YouTube channel. We did a segment last night on the Grid's game show called the 8 o'clock spot. Please tune in every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. We do a game show, and it's a competition, who has the best takes and whatnot. And one of the questions, matter of fact, at the very end of the show, was who's the best team in the NFC? Is it the Detroit Lions? Is it the Minnesota Vikings? Is it somebody else? Now, you'll see in Bryson's best 10 kind of the more specific rankings of teams in the NFC, as well as obviously in the AFC and the NFL in totality. To me, it's razor thin just on surface level. So Minnesota has, and along with Pittsburgh, and it's a competition right now, arguably the best defense in professional football. Brian Flores, thus far, assistant coach of the year, no doubt about it. Kevin O'Connell, along with Matt LaFleur. Now, O'Connell probably took the lead after Sunday, but coach of the year thus far through the first 4 weeks. O'Connell's been unbelievable. Brian Flores has done an insane job with the defense. They were active on, adding guys in the draft, in free agency, adding Stephon Gilmore. Dallas Turner was my preseason pick to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. They got a lot of pieces in Minnesota that can really make things hard for you as an offense, to put it mildly. But I was thinking of it like this. Minnesota, Detroit, no Super Bowls between the two of them. Vikings made 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. Basically we're like the 90s Bills, other than the fact that they didn't go to 4 Super Bowls in a row, but came up short. Those are some really, really good Minnesota teams. Detroit's obviously never gone. They got to the NFC title game recently a year ago, blew a 17-point lead to the Niners. Maybe if a couple plays go their way, they potentially win that sucker. But these are two franchises. We've tended to give Minnesota more respect because they've had longer playoff runs. They have had long stretches of just being absolutely dreadful, the way the Lions have, even though the Lions, of course, have turned it around under Dan Campbell. But I was thinking about it like this. There's a lot of known commodities for the Detroit Lions. I pretty much know what I'm getting every Sunday. Win, lose, or draw, I mostly know what I'm getting. Defensively is my only concern with this team. They're the polar opposite of the Vikings, where, man, 29 to Seattle. The Seahawks basically have, 500 yards of offense, essentially. Kenneth Walker's great. Geno Smith, it looks like freaking prime Russell Wilson like 10 years ago. It's unbelievable. And that's a concern. The secondary, which I really hoped would get better thus far, kind of uneven, not terribly promising on a Monday Night Football game at home. But Jared Goff, I know he is. You give him time in the pocket, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Now, when pressure breaks down, Jared Goff turns into like darn near a backup. But you get Jared Goff time in the pocket with the best O-line in football, he can go 18 for 18. And by the way, we could show you all stats provided by our friends at Stat News, all graphics provided by my man Alfred Parsar Jr. We can show you the stats right here with Jared Goff in the first half of his last 2 games. Look at that. 24 of 24. 229 passing yards, 2 TDs, obviously 0 interceptions. First quarterback in over 45 years to start 2 games in a single season with 10 or more consecutive completions. So last 2 first halves, Jared Goff has been literally perfect. What does that point to? Props to Goff, no question. But Ben Johnson. This is what I've talked about often with Nathaniel Hackett and the New York Jets is the lack of creativity, right? Forget great coach, and I think Ben Johnson's a great offensive coordinator, maybe the best in the league. Any coach worth their salt has a good first 15 plays, has a good opening script. You have all week to work on, especially in the case of Detroit, an extra day to prep for Seattle, a Seahawks defense, which have been unbelievable, albeit against bad quarterback play, the first 3 games. That's where coaches are judged. And you see the results of Jared Goff. He's been, again, in the last 2 first halves on mostly scripted plays, literally perfect. Not that Minnesota has it, but that's Detroit. We know who Ben Johnson is as an offensive coordinator. We know Dan Campbell, win, lose, draw, is going to have his guys ready to play. I have questions about him situationally, but he's going to have his guys ready to play. Minnesota, fantastic. Maybe the best defense in the league. Kevin O'Connell's a proven great coach. Flores is a great defensive coordinator. You got the weapons on offense. TJ Hawkinson may play this week. May play his first game of the year with Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson, best receiver in the game, with Jordan Addison. All these pieces that they have. This may sound harsh, but darn it, this is how I view things. It's like if you were it's like, this is a dark example, but it's like if someone was a convicted felon for the first time in their life and someone who did it a second time. Like in the state of California, if you commit a felony, if you're convicted of a felony a second time, you can serve an additional 5 years in prison. Our criminal justice system, again, rightfully so, it's not perfect, but it is good in the fact that, folks who continuously break the law, there's harsher punishment. We give you less leeway. Whereas the Detroit Lions, they don't have a winning history either. Boy, do we have some no commodities there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, top 10 receiver, maybe bordering on top 5. I don't want to go too crazy. No question top 10. If he keeps doing what he's doing, who knows? Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, great offensive line. Goff and Ben Johnson in sync. Jamison Williams, who I said would come out to play this season. No injuries, no suspensions. And he saw what he did with the long touchdown, just like he did against the Rams in week 1 on Monday against Seattle. The reason I use that example, because there are known commodities with the Minnesota Vikings. I got to see more from Sam Darnold. And it may sound unfair. I have often said, we know Sam Darnold drafted 3rd overall out of USC 2018 to the New York Jets. And I've often said on the show is that the New York Jets is the franchise where all young quarterbacks' dreams go to die. And we know it didn't go terribly well with Sam Darnold. There's the infamous M&F game versus the New England Patriots and Belichick, where he's literally seeing ghosts. All this. It was a mess in New York. Then he goes to Carolina, and he's okay, but it's he mostly isn't playing terribly efficient football at all. Completion percentages in the high 50s. Just not a great player. Then he goes to San Francisco. He's with Shanahan. He backs up Purdy, gets to kind of absorb some of that information. And now he goes to a great coach in Kevin O'Connell with excellent weapons in Minnesota. The man might be the MVP of the league through the first 4 weeks. I get that, and I give him props for that. Everybody who is committed, in the football context in this instance, criminal acts, aka turnovers and inefficient play at the quarterback position, everybody deserves a second chance. But I am going to give the guy in Detroit, not just Goff, but the guys in Detroit, because I have a longer history with them, slightly but longer, of winning success, of being one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL in the second half of the 2022 season after a horrible start, darn near getting to the playoffs. After getting to the NFC title game last year, upsetting Kansas City on opening night on ring night in Arrowhead Stadium, or banner night rather. They didn't get the rings, but they got the banner. I'm going to give you more leeway if you give me reason to. If your history shows me that I should. And the reality is, was Sam Darnold, and you'll see where I have the Vikings on Bryce's best 10. Spoiler alert, they're pretty high on the list. You'll see. But that's the concern. Is that we have, prior to this year, we have 6 years of evidence that says, he's back up. Now, this may, turn around his reputation. But, I use the example like with Baker Mayfield. I mean, does Cleveland make quarterbacks work? And by the way, I used to be a Baker skeptic. But is Cleveland a franchise exactly gets quarterbacks right? You see the memes all the time with these poor Browns fans. And I say that somewhat kiddingly. Browns fans really get on my nerves. Point is, well, they have these jerseys where they got the duct tape of all the quarterbacks' names that have played for them in like the last 25 years or something. Baker got him to a playoff game. Matter of fact, won a playoff game on the road in Pittsburgh and pushed the defending champion Chiefs to the brink in that second playoff game. So even despite how it ended in Cleveland, how it went in Carolina, went to the Rams, somewhat of a quarterback rehabilitation to a certain degree, and then with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he's been crushing it. We do have more extensive history with Baker playing well prior to his best football, which is coming right now in Tampa Bay. We don't really have that with Sam Darnold. Is that fair? History or the future will tell us that. Only time will tell us that. But I have more of extensive history with Goff, with this offensive line, Campbell, Ben Johnson, the weapons, running backs. And by the way, we have consistency with the defense. Aiden Hutchinson's awesome, and after that, it's a little shaky. That's the thing that has me a little bit concerned as picking the Lions to go to the NFC title game. But I don't know. I think we're in a spot right now with Detroit where they're more known commodities. They're mostly healthy. Now, knock on wood, that stays the case. But we know it's the NFL. It's a physical sport. Injuries are going to happen. A lot of times it's about who's the healthiest team at the end of the year. And so, we'll see what happens moving forward. Detroit and Minnesota, they play actually in a couple of weeks. So that's, Detroit's in a few weeks rather. Detroit's in a bye. They go to Dallas and then they go to Minnesota. That'll be a fun game. I don't know what the primetime game is on October 20th. They need to flex that puppy to like a big Fox or CBS game. Like that's a huge, huge matchup. But I just, it's as well as Minnesota's playing, and you'll see where I've got him later in the show on Bryce's Best 10. I just can't buy in him quite as much as Detroit because I have a longer, extensive history with the Lions. And as for Dan Campbell, and as for this Lions team, you heard it in my little soundbite, everybody gets a kneecap. Does any team in the NFL know who they are more than Detroit? Maybe Kansas City, because but even Kansas City, right? They used to be a high-flying team. Then they used to be a kind of a death by 1,000 cuts team. Now it's just it's just like the Patriots. It's ridiculous. Not turn the ball over. Our defense is going to make some plays. You're going to give us unforced errors. I don't think there's a team in the NFL. Pittsburgh's in that conversation for sure. That knows who they want to be week in and week out like the Detroit Lions do. That doesn't mean to say the game plans are the same every week. Otherwise, they wouldn't have this type of success. Man, they know who they are. We are going to absolutely punch you in the freaking teeth for 60 minutes. We are not going to relent. And no matter what the score is, and you've seen it now for basically 3.5 years with Dan Campbell's squad, I think that's the best team in the NFC right now, bar none. The defense does concern me. It does. But they at least have playmakers on that side with Aiden Hutchinson. So we'll see what happens with this football team moving forward. I got to see more from Sam Darnold. It's not that I haven't been impressed. I've been extremely impressed. He's been outstanding. Statistically, he's been the best quarterback in the league this season. But there does have to be a certain level of, by the first 6 seasons of his career, Sam Darnold and best quarterback, those did not flow in a sentence prior to 2024. So we do have to keep that in mind. And a lot of this is Kevin O'Connell. And listen, quarterbacks worth their salt with any bit of talent, which Darnold clearly had. He wouldn't have went third overall 6 years ago if he didn't. You got to have coaching. I think Mahomes is a Super Bowl champion if he doesn't go to Kansas City. I don't think he's leading a dynasty without Andy Reid. Andy Reid's brilliant. And Mahomes is probably the most talented quarterback ever, but every quarterback needs elite coaching to one degree or another. And Sam Darnold is certainly, no different. News we got, though, in the last 24 to 48 hours, and this has been percolating over the last few days, is Davante Adams with the Las Vegas Raiders. So this is an unbelievable story. So we've known for a while, particularly once, because, listen, Davante Adams got traded to the Las Vegas Raiders in the offseason of 2022 because he wanted to get more money, A, than what Green Bay was offering, and B, he wanted to play with his buddy Derek Carr. Derek Carr was his quarterback at Fresno State, and those two are really tight, really close, and so Davante wanted that, camaraderie and familiarity with this quarterback. All due respect, right? Derek Carr gets traded to the Saints, or gets moved off of by the Las Vegas Raiders, and now Davante Adams is stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell. And now this year it's Aiden O'Connell and, in particular, Gardner Minshew, who's been there, obviously, the start of the first 4 games of the season. You have to imagine the kid isn't exactly, not the kid, he's a grown man now, but guy isn't exactly thrilled with the spot that he's in, given the highs that he reached with Aaron Rodgers back in the day in Green Bay. Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, likes an Instagram post referring to the idea, hey, could this be Davante Adams? Has he played his last snaps with the Raiders? Now, it is, to me, is an inexcusable move. Like, quarterbacks, but certainly coaches, because coaches, in most instances, Mike McDonald and Sean McVay notwithstanding, most coaches tend to be older than their players. Like, that's conventional wisdom. That's most of the time the case. That can't happen. Antonio Pierce, kudos to him. He took over in the middle of last year after Josh McDaniels was fired, did a great job. Raiders were in the playoff hunt. Kudos. Got them play with greater intensity and energy, and the defense was better. He did a really good job. And the Raiders are 2-2 this season with the win over Baltimore in Baltimore. So he hasn't done a bad job. But so much of coaching and so much of being successful in this league at that spot is not just X's and O's or motivation. It's the ability to connect one-on-one with your players. And even if, Brady and Belichick, let's just put it this way, weren't exactly best friends, but there was a healthy respect for one another, certainly in a football context, that both these individuals knew, okay, to a certain degree, one more than the other, Belichick kind of needed Brady more, but they needed one another to be able to reach the incredible successes that they did. Evidently, Antonio Pierce, whatever animosity there might be between he and Davante Adams, did not feel this way and decided to make their beef public. That's almost all the players, it feels like, because they're younger guys. That's usually the case. In this instance, it was the head coach. So listen, in that regard, I thought it was absolutely inexcusable on the part of the head coach, Antonio Pierce. So Davante Adams has requested a trade, and we could show you what the DraftKings odds say right now in terms of the teams that he could end up on. The Jets are the favorite. Surprise, surprise. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers. Davante has a history with Aaron. They had an almost unstoppable connection in Green Bay. Jets are the favorites, followed by the New Orleans Saints. Big gap, my Pittsburgh Steelers. Then Washington Commanders, Dallas Cowboys tied at plus 800. So, the report came out today, I believe it was from Schefter, that Davante Adams preferred destinations. Jets with Aaron Rodgers, Raiders with Derek Carr. He had a lot of success with Rodgers. Derek Carr was his college quarterback and the whole reason he came to Vegas in the first place. So, to me, there are 2 teams. And if I'm wrong, I'll come on the show and say it and admit I'm wrong. To me, there's only 2 teams where he's going to end up on. One of the 2 teams. New York Jets, who obviously favored by DraftKings for obvious reasons. The Jets' offense is painfully limited, and I said it going back into this past offseason, and thus far I've been proven pretty correct on that. That Aaron Rodgers, shocker, hasn't been good in 3 years, 40 going on 41, off an Achilles surgery, with a bad offensive coordinator, with no rapport with his receivers. Oh my gosh, he hasn't been that good. What a shocker. But the New York Jets leading receiver is who? It's not Garrett Wilson, it's not Mike Williams. It's Allen Lazard, who's not as good as those two guys, but the connection with Aaron Rodgers going back to Green Bay. Now, Aaron and Davante haven't played with each other in 3 years, but you have to imagine there's some sort of, it'd be like riding a bike again to a certain degree. I have to imagine that. Listen, I'm no quarterback or receiver, but I have to imagine you work with the guy over and over and over. Davante and Aaron were teammates for eight seasons. There has to be some sense of familiarity that you can just kind of step back into. So it would help the Jets, it would help Rodgers, and it'd help Davante. Certainly, for my questions about Aaron in terms of the quarterback he has today, he's way better than Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. There's nobody on God's green earth, even the biggest Aaron Rodgers skeptics, would argue that. So the Jets will need. Now, do I think the Jets still make the playoffs? No, but it makes their offense better, and it pleases Aaron. Maybe eases some of the tensions going on between he and Saleh and the organization. So it would be a good move for the Jets that I would be in favor of. He'll end up on the Jets and only my Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'll explain exactly why. New Orleans Saints. Okay, why would adding Davante Adams, what would that do for New Orleans as it pertains to sticking to their offensive philosophy? We know they want to run the football with Alvin Kamara. We know they already have guys like Chris Olave who can space the field. And for Davante Adams, I don't know, you followed Derek Carr one time, and it's not Derek's fault necessarily, but you followed Derek Carr one time. That didn't work so well. You left one of the best run franchises with, at that point, still a great quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. And your numbers still great, still very impressive, still Pro Bowlers first year in Vegas, but they deteriorated. Who's to say that can't be the same case with the New Orleans Saints? Washington, maybe. I don't think that's out of the question. I don't think the Commanders. I think that Washington's trying to work on the development. Whatever that happens this season, and Washington's potentially good enough to be a playoff team. They're an insanely great offense thus far through the first 4 games. They're trying to develop Jaden Daniels. He's got to report Terry McLaurin. He's got to report these guys, be able to build that, be able to cultivate that into whatever you're going to get this season, and then move forward with what you have. Figure out what you got. Keep building on what you have. It's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Washington's not anything close to a win-now situation. If they make the playoffs, great. If they're like the Houston Texans last year, great. But that's not the primary objective. The season is a failure if we don't make the playoffs. That's not the case for the Commanders. As for Dallas, Jordan Schultz has already reported today that Dallas is not going to be the trademark for Davante. Shocker, Jerry Jones not being aggressive whatsoever. That's just not in his DNA at this point. Pittsburgh's the odd team out. Other than the Jets, who I think should be the favorite. Keep in mind, Pittsburgh this offseason was that close to landing Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know what held that up. I don't know if it was a matter of maybe the 49ers wanted a George Pickens. Maybe they wanted a guy, maybe they wanted like a Calvin Austin, just an extra body, just to add depth to their wide receiving core. Whatever held that up, it got held up. But there's no question. Any insider in the NFL will tell you Pittsburgh came closer to anybody to landing Brandon Ayuk from the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, before he ended up signing a contract extension with San Francisco. Pittsburgh's in a spot. And by the way, reports also indicate 93.7 in Pittsburgh indicated that only way this happens is if Davante wants to come to Pittsburgh. Now, that's obviously the case for any situation, but you have a smart offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. You have a quarterback in Justin Fields, who, again, I talked about last night on my main EJ Savage's show, Boys of His Own. Please check that out. That you're seeing week after week after week, slowly but surely, the offensive coaching staff of the Steelers are starting to take the training wheels off for Justin Fields on his proverbial bike, running the offense, being able to make throws from the pocket, being able to play from behind, which he showed us he can absolutely do against the Indianapolis Colts. It would also help the development of a guy like George Pickens. If George Pickens is your number 2 receiver, he's going to get against your number 2 corner. He's going to get those one-on-one looks because you can't just shift one side of the field and pay attention to him the entire time. You know what that's going to do for his opportunities? You know what that's going to do for his confidence? You know what that's going to do for his development to learn behind a route running extraordinaire in Davante Adams? a professional who goes about his business the right way, it's going to do wonders for Pickens. He gets to go from clearly an immature head coach in Antonio Pierce to the model of leadership at that position in Mike Tomlin. Cool, steady, never too high, never too low. The standard is the standard, all those things. You get a great defense to back you up. Yeah, the division is tougher, but guess what? You're not in the same division as Patrick Mahomes anymore. That's a plus. That helps. A stable franchise, an opportunity to, by the way, it'll help Davante too with George Pickens opposite side of the field of him, because Davante will not always get doubled depending on what looks at in what situation in the game that the Pittsburgh Steelers are facing. So given how close, and the Steelers know, obviously, if they, I don't know what Pittsburgh sees himself as this season, to be completely frank with you. I see them at this point as a playoff team, as a team that could potentially still win the AFC North. I think we're only 4 games in. I would not be shocked if that were to be the case. Cincinnati, 1 win. Baltimore, we'll see. Ravens look like to be the biggest threat, and Cleveland's Cleveland. They're terrible. But if they do see themselves a team that, hey, maybe if certain things break our way, we could find ourselves in an AFC title game. Worst case, in the AFC divisional round, if Justin Fields continues to improve his development. If the connection between him and Arthur Smith and the receivers continue to improve the way that has. By the way, with the running game, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren when he comes back, Cordero Patterson, Justin Fields can run. And so I think it's a good fit. The Jets make the most sense just as it pertains to his connection with Aaron Rodgers. If that happens, won't be shocked at all. Matter of fact, I actually suggested before the season that this could be a real possibility. But it ain't the Jets. Steelers are clearly, in terms of teams that need a second receiver, and almost went and got a second receiver for what would have been a higher asking price from the 49ers than what the Raiders reportedly want for Davante, which is about a second-round pick, maybe an additional pick or player. It makes sense for Pittsburgh to do it. It shows, again, I said last season, this is the last point I'll make, but I said last season when it came to an end, and Pittsburgh was an outstanding defense, great situationally, but an utter disaster on offense. The fact that they won 10 games, you give some props to Mason Rudolph, and the fact that Mike Tomlin finally moved off Matt Canada midseason, but it was bland. It was uncreative. There was no mystery as it pertains to what the Steelers were going to run. It was a mess. My concerns were, okay, Tomlin's a great coach, certainly a great defensive coach. Is he going to adapt and adjust to the modern NFL? Well, he hired Arthur Smith. I was like, hey, Arthur Smith was a great coordinator in Tennessee. That's a good move. That's a sign. He, bam, moved off Kenny Pickett. Okay. You sign Russell Wilson. Okay, that's a veteran. He's better than Kenny Pickett. And you trade for Justin Fields. He's better than Kenny Pickett too. Okay, you could have a veteran, or you could have a guy who's somewhat, to a certain degree, a project, even going into year 4 of his career. Maybe he just needs to be in the right spot in Pittsburgh with a more stable franchise than Chicago. You've seen the slow developing evolution by Mike Tomlin and by the Pittsburgh Steelers, being able to get deals done with Pat Freiermuth, drafting offensive linemen. This would go to be kind of like the final. Okay, yeah, Tomlin he's done a 180 in terms of adjusting. Maybe he was late to the party, but that's fine. You could still come to the party in terms of what the modern NFL wants to be. Belichick never did. Belichick never did in New England. It cost him his job. And to a certain degree, minimally, but it did, a little bit of his legacy, especially after what Brady did in Tampa Bay. So kudos to Tomlin for what he's done thus far. I think it makes a lot of sense. I really do. Davante to the Jets. Yeah, it makes the most sense just in terms of his relationship with Aaron. Second place is Pittsburgh. So I'm going to say on the record right now, Davante Adams will be traded to the Jets, or Davante Adams will be traded to the Steelers. No one else. Washington wants to work on the development of Jaden Daniels. Dallas is Dallas. They never go after big stars ever. And as for the New Orleans Saints, I don't know. Last time Davante Adams followed Derek Carr, how'd that go? He got the bag, but numbers have gone down slightly, and you have a coach who evidently hates you. So, or maybe hate's too strong, but is openly showing contempt for you. It's a suggestion. All right. Again, hour earlier start to carving up as usual, but we will be back in a minute. I'm going to do a carving up the context segment regarding Pete Rose, who obviously passed away. The news was announced on Monday night, and really kind of to me the key issue of him not being the Hall of Fame and what it mostly comes down to as it pertains to his lifetime best. So stay tuned for that. Carving Up Live will be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. So Carving Up the Context is a segment we do every Wednesday evening around 6:30. In this case, obviously 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. And I normally don't do this, but I'm not totally sure what my Carving Up the Context segment is going to be, usually until around like Tuesday night, Wednesday mornings. I'm starting to get my topics ready and figure out what I'm going to do for the show. But I literally announced, as the news of Pete Rose after the news of Pete Rose's passing, I'm like, okay, this is like a prime Carving Up the Context segment. So, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, prime time, Deion Sanders says, "Give me my theme music." On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, we're going to be talking about the late great Pete Rose, who passed away on Monday at the age of 83 years old. There's no question one of the greatest baseball players of all time. We can go and show you his resume. It's, again, there's few that have come close to matching it. 17-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champion. He won the NL MVP in 1973, World Series MVP in 1975, 2-time Gold Glove winner, and a 3-time National League batting champion. The guy was nothing short of a legend. Charlie Hustle, as they called him, played every single baseball game like it was his absolute last. Of course, when he became a manager for the Cincinnati Reds, he got in trouble because he illegally bet on, or according to Major League Baseball policy, bet on games played by the Reds. Now, again, want to make sure we clarify, he bet on the Reds. He didn't bet against them. This isn't a situation like the White Sox in the early 20th century. This was he bet on his team. Doesn't make it right. I certainly don't condone an athlete doing, gambling in any sense of the word, but this wasn't. Remember Jonte Porter, I think it was Michael Porter Jr.'s little brother, got in trouble with the Toronto Raptors because he gambled, like he bet all the unders for his stat. It was a disaster. He's banned from the NBA for life, rightfully so. It fundamentally goes against competition, and it can never happen. That's not what Pete Rose did. But I thought about this, and I've said this on Carving Up Live. Anytime this Hall of Fame conversation has come up in Major League Baseball as it pertains to Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, anybody. And again, obviously, those have been tied to steroids. Guys who have taken PEDs, guys who, to some level or another, have had their career enhanced. Maybe their numbers juiced to a certain degree because of what they were able to do physically, hitting the baseball, pitching, whatever the case may be. No PEDs for Pete Rose. He did not cheat. Obviously, it was not really a thing back then in terms of PEDs, but you get the concept. But I've often said that, I would let Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, check his numbers. He was a Hall of Famer prior to using steroids. Alex Rodriguez, no doubt Hall of Famer. All of these different situations, Roger Clemens as well. But I've thought about this, that the Baseball Hall of Fame, just like the Pro Football Hall of Fame, just like the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown is more than anything to tell the story of the game of baseball. It is there to serve as a museum. It is there a museum to tell the story of how baseball got to where the history of this beautiful sport. And, we've had conversations in the NFL about guys like, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? And it's hard because, Eli was an average to above average quarterback most of his career, but he had 2 unbelievable runs, beat the greatest quarterback ever in the Super Bowl twice, and outplayed him twice. Like, it's hard. But oftentimes what I go back to is, can't tell the story of the NFL without Eli Manning. If he got one Super Bowl, no. 2 over Brady, whew, that's pretty good. And how long career, stats, all that. We're not talking about an Eli Manning situation with Pete Rose. Ask yourself, if you had a child and your kid got into baseball for the very first time, and let's say that they were on Instagram or TikTok, which, listen, I'm not exactly, recommending that for very small children. Keep the social media away until they're more emotionally developed. Different conversation for a whole different genre of a show. But say they're scrolling through their TikTok, they're getting to baseball for the first time, and the algorithm is suggesting different baseball accounts and posts and highlights, telling the history of the game, all these highlights. And they're scrolling through, and they see this guy for the Cincinnati Reds, and he's running as hard as he can to first place, or trying to score at home. He's he hits for average, all these different things. Effort, playing his arse off every single day for the Reds. You see that, and say they turn to you and say, "Mom, Dad, who's this guy? What's he about?" And you'd say, "Well, son," or "Well, daughter, this is what he's done. All-time leader in hits, all-time leader in career singles, career games played, career at-bats, and career plate appearances. All 5 records, all of them incredibly notable. I mean, hitting the baseball is literally the goal every single time you come to the plate, is to put the ball in play and to get on base. That's kind of the point of hitting." And you said, "Hey, by the way, there's a museum in Cooperstown, New York, right, that tells the story of baseball, and he's not in it." And the kid asks, "Well, wait, why? If he did all these things, how is he not in the Hall of Fame?" You say, "Well, he got banned because he bet on games." And you teach your kid that's not right, and that's all those different things. You're like, "Yeah, but it didn't affect his stats. It didn't affect his play. Pete Rose was certainly not perfect as an individual. There's no question about that, but the results speak for themselves. The guy's one of the greatest baseball players who ever lived. He was part of the greatest lineup in the history of Major League Baseball, the Big Red Machine. Canseco's, Morgan, Griffey, Bench, all of these guys, and he was a part of that." To me, what this comes down to more than anything, Pete Rose, the lifetime ban was never not lifted, not just because of the gambling. Because we know the gambling in this country, or at least sports gambling, if we're going to keep it to that, the entire, it's changed in terms of legally, right? You can legally bet on sports now. Supreme Court voted for that years ago. The stigma around it has changed in many regards. Like used to back in the day, if you used to watch a show on ESPN 10, 15 years ago, the word gambling wouldn't come out of people's mouths. Now there's whole shows on networks based on it. The stigma has changed. Now, it's not for athletes, but the stigma has changed. The culture around it has changed. This is not about gambling with Pete Rose, why that lifetime ban was never lifted by any of the commissioners since then. It's personal. It's personal. There have been plenty of guys who've taken steroids or in the Hall of Fame. We don't have to name names, but they have. That entire era in the 90s and early 2000s, they all used steroids to some level or another. Most of them did, at the very least. I don't know. We feel comfortable letting some guys in and not some others. But Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame. You know why? Barry Bonds wasn't the greatest guy with the media. He tended to be, let's be diplomatic and say, aloof. The same can be said about Alex Rodriguez. The same can be said about Roger Clemens. Were all 3 of these individuals transparent about their steroid use? No, they were not. Does that wipe away what they did in the field? Does anything that Pete Rose did, the lack of transparency that he did show, when it came to when they were looking at whether he bet on the Cincinnati Reds, does it affect what he did in the field? Because again, as we said earlier, the guy bet on his team. Not saying it's right, but it's a lot better than if he'd gambled against the Reds or took the unders on his stat totals. Obviously, wouldn't have reached the highs that he did if he did that. It's personal with Pete Rose because they wanted to stick it to a guy who was, again, Pete Rose was a different character. Pete Rose was beloved by fans because of how he played the game of baseball. And because he was polarizing, because baseball has a crippling sense of self-righteousness, they had to stand on their high horse and say, maybe you will get in the Hall of Fame someday. Obviously, your resume, of course, says you should, but you won't get the right to be able to see it. I would have more respect for Major League Baseball if this man never sees the light of day in Cooperstown, or if his legacy doesn't. At least stand on it now that he's gone. Don't put him in now. Sure, his family and those who were close, I'm sure they'll get to see it, but the man you're honoring will not be there to be able to witness what should have been the crowning achievement of his baseball career. It's personal. They wanted the satisfaction of being able to say, hey, got one up on Pete Rose. Just like you did with Bonds. For different reasons, I get it, but for Bonds, for Clemens, for A-Rod, you want us to continue to defend yourself, to be able to put this false image that is flat out not true about your sport. Baseball is as corrupt as any sport in the history of the world. International soccer's got a very strong case. International soccer's probably more corrupt than baseball. Other than that, I mean, Deflategate, the main culprit, so to speak, Brady, was basically found not guilty in the last few years. NBA, I don't know. I don't really know you could cheat in the NBA, but if you did, I don't know. They haven't found it yet. We got cameras everywhere. Houston Astros, we just had a scandal 4 years ago. By the way, Astros just got eliminated like a few minutes ago. The baseball world's happy about that. Banging on trash cans. You want to continue to, and you see it all the time, right? It's always the folks who have this who act like they have this moral high ground, all high and mighty, and my way is the best way, and if you are not doing it my way, you are immoral. Isn't always those people that have like infidelity scandals? It doesn't always seem to be that way, or they have some really, really shady skeletons in their closet. Doesn't that seem to always be the case? Be very skeptical of those who act as if they are on this moral high ground above everybody else. Usually it's a sense of overcompensation. That's baseball. That's how baseball has been run over the last 2 to 3 decades. It's why Pete Rose, whether he gets in the Hall of Fame or not, and there's no question he should be in. I don't think anybody argues that. Anybody who has any respect for the history of the game of baseball, and I thought that's what baseball was about, is about respecting the legends. There's a way to play the game. I don't know. I think Pete Rose played the game the right way. The man was called Charlie Hustle. He gave it his all in every single play of his career. It was the best player, one of the best players ever in doing it. Imagine you tell your kid, hey, all-time leader in home runs. Like the ultimate goal for a batter is to hit that puppy over the fence. He's not in the Hall of Fame. All-time leader in hits. He's not in the Hall of Fame either. Because baseball, and to a level its writers, want to preserve this false image of a sport, when in reality, again, it's mostly overcompensation. Baseball's great, always will be great. But it was great because of guys like Pete Rose. And the fact that this man will not get to see, whether he's in or he gets in or not, the fact that this man will not get to see himself enshrined with the greats of baseball's past is an unforgivable sports sin that Major League Baseball's committed over the last few decades. Unforgivable. That is it for this week's edition of Carving Up the Context. This is one of those where there's an old saying that common sense isn't common. Anytime this conversation gets brought up, and there's this, I keep going back to this, where baseball acts as if they are just on a different level than everybody else. There's a way to play the game. You don't show up the opponent. I don't know. There's as many cheating scandals in baseball as there's in any sport in the world. You're not exactly perfect. We all know that person in our life, right? That's acts as if they're above everybody else, and in reality, it's like, they're kind of shady. That's Major League Baseball. What they did to Pete Rose was a disgrace. Was an absolute disgrace. There's no question about it. I mean, I saw that news yesterday, and I'd always held out hope throughout my time rooting for baseball. And I'm not old. I'm 21 years old. But just in a sense of, I mean, we talk about respect for the game. Well, how about we have respect for guys who played the game at the highest level as hard as they possibly could? There was always a part of me that was like, you know what? Eventually they'll come to their senses. Maybe when Rob Manfred is gone in a couple years. Nope. So when I saw that, obviously more than anything, I'm sad that, you know, he's gone, sad for his family and for his loved ones. But the fact that he won't get in is just a darn shame. And again, like I said on Monday's show, I alluded to this. Part of me has like a personal connection to this in the sense that my dad, who once again, it's my dad's birthday, love you, Dad. You know, he grew up. My dad played baseball, but he was a big time Cincinnati Reds fan growing back in the day. Fan of the big red machine, all the players again, Bench, Canseco, Rose, Morgan, Griffey. Yeah, listen, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. No other way around it. Okay, I just that one really fires. There's, you know, I'm not a guy who, at the very least, I try not to be, and I'd like to think I'm this way, who gets outraged over the little things, particularly in sports. And I get fan is, my man Colin Cowherd often says all the time, fan is short for fanatic, right? We all act irrationally when it comes to our teams. That's what makes sports so great. But I mean, some of these things will happen in sports and people lose their minds. This is the worst thing. It's like, guys, let's take a deep breath. This is forever now. This is forever. Whether it gets in or not, I'll never get to see it. And that's a darn shame. Well, the best players ever won't get to get that sense of satisfaction of getting in. So let's move on, though. Let's move on to Bryson's best 10, my top 10 teams in the National Football League. So there's been a lot of movement. I will say there's one brand new team. Not that they've been in the Bryson's best 10 before. They've been out for a couple weeks, but they're back in the top 10 list. So let's go and get the background music going. For week 5. Here we go. We will start at number 10, the 10th best team in the National Football League, down 6 spots, so a pretty big drop from last week. It is the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are the 10th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, odd stat. So the Packers are 0-2 with Jordan Love, 2-0 with Malik Willis. It's a weird dynamic. Again, Jordan Love, first game back from the injury, playing against a Vikings defense that is utterly dominant. And Green Bay really couldn't get things going offensively up until the fourth quarter. What I was a little bit shocked about, and again, everybody deserves a bad game, but the fact that they're just seem to be, O'Connell's a great coach, but Minnesota just seemed to be about 2 steps ahead of Green Bay on every possession. I mean, whether it was design plays, whether it's turning the football over, they're more prepared than Green Bay. In a game that was played at Lambeau, which I thought could be the difference in the spot. Listen, it's not Lambeau in December or January where it's freezing cold and it's a huge advantage for the home team. But listen, I think Green Bay is going to be fine in the long run. I love their weapons. They did lose Christian Watson this game. He got hurt. Knock on wood for him that he's not out for too long. But I think Jordan Love will get his feet back underneath him. This Packers defense, though, bad day at the office after looking like maybe they've turned a new corner after last season. We'll see if that's able to get back on track. The Packers are the 10th best team in the National Football League. At number 9, falling a spot from where they were a week ago, it is my Pittsburgh Steelers. My Steelers are the 9th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So the only reason they fell a spot is just because of the fact that they lost a game to the Colts that I don't think they should have. But the reason they're not out of the top 10 is 2 things. A, I still think it's the best defense in the NFL. Everybody deserves a bad day at the office. The Texans have had a bad game. So have the Niners. Listen, the Niners have lost twice. They've only had really 1 bad game. Again, against Minnesota, a common opponent from some of these teams that have struggled in recent weeks. But listen, TJ Watt's going to have a dominant game against Dallas coming this week. I'm just going to say right now, man's got 3 sacks. This defense is still loaded. It's coached by Mike Tomlin. They'll be fine. Everybody deserves a bad day. It's offensively that I was most impressed. So fall down 17-0. In years past for Pittsburgh, the last 3, 4, 5 seasons, that's a rout. Colts run away with that thing. It's the fact that Justin Fields was able to make big-time throws from the pocket. We know his mobility. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in the game against the Colts, but his mobility, being able to be accurate with the football, again, him and Arthur Smith have just been a match made in football heaven and a godsend for the Steelers offense. Getting guys like Pickens involved, Pat Freiermuth in the short game, who caught a touchdown in this game. I mean, Pittsburgh's running game, which have been really good at number 1 in the NFL in rushing attempts, kind of uneven game against the Colts, but trusting their game plan and being able for Justin Fields to adapt and adjust to whatever the Colts threw at him. It wasn't until like a late bad snap by the center really kind of cost the Steelers an opportunity to, at the very least, tie the game and send it to overtime. So my Steelers, still very optimistic about them as a potential AFC North Division winner, the 9th best team in the National Football League. At number 8 and up 1 spot from last week, it is the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are the 8th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, again, if had Pittsburgh won, San Francisco would have just stayed at 9, because I think at this point we need to have like a new rule on the show or on any rankings list. If you play the Patriots, it's kudos to you. It counts just the same as any other win. If you were to beat, the darn Chiefs or something, it's New England is really, 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 really bad. Those first 2 weeks were kind of a mirage to a certain degree. And a combination of the fact that the Bengals already started every season slow. But as for San Francisco, Brock Purdy, kind of an uneven game, a little bit reckless with the football against New England. But George Kittle back in the lineup. Deebo Samuel back in the lineup. Missing Christian McCaffrey for potentially even longer than the Niners originally thought. Achilles tendonitis in both knees. It's still a really talented defense. Kyle Shanahan's brilliant. We know that. Jordan Mason has done a really, really good job running the football. I've been impressed with what I've seen from Brock Purdy through 4 weeks. Not the greatest game against New England, but Juwan Jennings has stepped up. Ayuk and Purdy still not quite in sync. A lot of that obviously due to Ayuk's holdout in training camp due to the contract stuff. But San Francisco, still an outstanding roster with an outstanding head coach. They're absolutely in the top 10. Niners are the 8th best team in the National Football League. At number 7, I believe they went up a spot from last week. It is the Houston Texans. The Texans are the 7th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So again, this is a team that had Super Bowl aspirations after an incredible season last year. Of course, this is, I'd say, the most popular preseason AFC Championship game pick has been Chiefs-Texans, along with Chiefs-Ravens, a rematch from last year. We're a month into the season. My only concern with this team is I still haven't really seen a complete game. Right? In week 1, great offensive performance, bad on defense. In week 2, great defense, kind of below average on offense. In week 3, both sides were bad. Again, against the Minnesota Vikings. And then last week, I get it, divisional game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But if my man, I still love the guy, I want to believe him so bad, Trevor Lawrence could just hit a deep ball to Christian Kirk, Jacksonville probably wins that game, and Houston loses a home game to the only winless team in the National Football League. It took a C.J. Stroud, kudos to him, leading a game-winning drive at the end. I had this team as a division winner, but not one that was going to make a big-time playoff run. In January, I still think they're just a little too young. Leather pieces. Stroud's incredible. D'Amico Ryans is outstanding. There's not much not to like about this team other than the fact they're kind of like the Packers, the AFC. They're still a little too young. The Texans, still very talented. They're 3-1. It's not like the sky's falling right now. The 7th best team in the National Football League. At number 6, team I've been bullish on all season long, but they've lost 2 straight. They only fall a spot, though, from last week, and I'll explain why. It is the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are the 6th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. So I had the Chargers at 5 last week after the loss to Pittsburgh. Listen, I picked my Steelers to win that game because of the injuries to Justin Herbert. But coming into a game against the Chiefs, where, let's be honest right now, Kansas City, that's a home game for them in Los Angeles. The Chargers, I often joke, they have like 13 fans. No, you ever met somebody in the street and they said, hey, I'm like a diehard Chargers fan? I've never seen it. Maybe Marcellus Wiley. That's the only guy I could say who's an openly, passionate Chargers fan, and he played for him. So that's never met a Chargers fan. So basically, a road game at home. Herbert's beat up. There's no neither of your tackles. Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater gone. Derwin James gone due to suspension. Injury after injury, and they were in reaching distance with the champs if Chris Jones doesn't make another big-time clutch play in the fourth quarter, which is what he does. That's what the Chiefs do. But listen, it was a coaching masterclass by Harbaugh just to keep them in that game. I still like the roster. I still like their pieces. I still think they're going to the AFC title game. I'm not moving on my pick now just because it's gotten a little inconvenient. I don't do that. It's not carving it up. That's not what we do. Listen, they still got a great quarterback in Herbert. The bye couldn't have come at a better time for the squad. So listen, the Los Angeles Chargers, given the spot they're at, they know what they want to be, running the football, fantastic offensive line. Los Angeles Chargers are the 6th best team in the National Football League. At number 5, down 2 spots, and what's been a weird curse on Bryson's best 10, it is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are the 5th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. The curse that I'm referring to, by the way, is every single week, it's so weird, on Bryson's best 10, the number 3 team, folks, has lost. The Rams were number 3 in week 1. I think the Niners were number 3 in week 2. It's just this weird sort of odd curse. The Chargers were at one point were number 3. Like, it's just this weird sort of, I don't know if it's the curse of number 3. We'll see if number 3 gets cursed this week, given their matchup on Sunday. For the Bills, listen, get blown up by the Ravens. A lot of folks who have been Bills skeptics this offseason have said, hey, that's who the real Bills are, because they played a very easy schedule in the first 3 weeks. I reject that, and here's why. Everything favored Baltimore in that game. They're at home. Buffalo on a short week, off a blowout. Maybe it's human nature. You blow a team out at home, nationally televised game. Josh Allen's the MVP frontrunner. Everybody's telling you how great you are. There comes a sense of complacency. It just is. It's human nature. It happens. I still believe in this running game with James Cook. Of course, I believe in Josh Allen. He's outstanding. This Bills defense does have questions. I do worry about the middle of their defense, in particular their linebacking core. I still think they have really good pieces on in terms of the receiving core with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and I still certainly think Dalton Kincaid is a very, very talented tight end. Don't panic just now on the Buffalo Bills. Now that they have won, again, as I keep saying, bad day at the office. Maybe be concerned to whoever, if your favorite team is number 3, there might be a little bit of concern because of the Bryce's best 10 number 3 curse, but the Buffalo Bills are the 5th best team in the National Football League. At number 4, back on Bryce's best 10 for the first time in 3 weeks, and coming back at number 4, it is team I hate, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are the 4th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. I referenced that Sunday night game where they hammer Buffalo. That to me was less about the Bills being terrible and being a mess, and that was more about, Baltimore's ready to go. Baltimore, they know who they are. They tried the read option type of offense with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. That may work in Madden. That's great. But in the long run, it's not going to work as it pertains to, Derrick Henry is a classic I formation, just turn around and hand me the football type of running back. I still have some concerns about the defense, but Kyle Hamilton was excellent in that Buffalo Bills game. Lamar Jackson finding his groove. Listen, I think Tom Monken is the perfect offensive coordinator for this guy. I talked about earlier, if there's any team that knows who they are in the NFL more than the Detroit Lions, show them to me. The Pittsburgh Steelers are there, and the Baltimore Ravens, to a certain degree, are there. I still worry about this team situationally in the fourth quarter ever since 2020. Most blown 7-point plus fourth quarter leads in the NFL going back to that season. It's a very talented roster. The receiving core somewhat questionable, but they run the football as well as anybody. And Derrick Henry, he may not be the old Derrick Henry, but he's still the best. Just turn around and hand the football type running back in the NFL. The Ravens, I got to be objective as a Steelers fan, are the 4th best team in the National Football League. At number 3, like I said, you probably don't want your team to be number 3 given the curse of this segment. It is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are the 3rd best team in the National Football League, and here's why. So, look, I can't lie about what I'm seeing. The defense has been best or second best in the NFL. They're turning the football over. They're stopping the run. They're getting to the quarterback, and Sam Darnold's been excellent. Now, do I trust that that's going to continue? I have 6 years of evidence to say probably not, but it's the best coaching he's had in his career, at least in terms of playing. He had Kyle Shanahan last year, but the best coaching he's had as the starting quarterback of an NFL team. Justin Jefferson's still the best receiver in the game. Addison's an outstanding number 2. By the way, they could be getting T.J. Hawkinson back this week, who's one of the 10 best tight ends in the NFL. Defensively, they're unbelievable. The tandem of Flores and O'Connell calling the defense and calling the offense, that might be the best tandem in the NFL. By the way, Minnesota, the very first team in NFL history to start 4-0 with 3 of their wins being against a team that won a playoff game the year prior. That being obviously the 49ers, the Texans, and on Sunday going into Lambeau, and don't let the final score fool you, hammered the Packers. Green Bay made a nice little rally in the fourth quarter. Vikings were the better team throughout. They took their foot off the gas pedal in the third quarter, which allowed Green Bay to get back into it. Do I trust them more than the team I'm about to name at number 2? I really don't. but they've been really good. Well, one of two undefeated teams left. The Vikings are the third best team in the National Football League. At number 2, again, my adoptive team, it is the Detroit Lions. The Lions are the second best team in the National Football League. Where they've been all year long on Bryce's Best 10. What did y'all do, Dan Campbell?
Kneecap.
That's what they do. Listen, it's an explosive offense, arguably the best in the NFL. Jared Goff, again, on his last 2 games in the first half, folks, 24 for 24. Props to Goff, props to the O-line for giving this guy who, listen, we know Goff turns into somewhat of a backup if he faces pressure. He's got a clean pocket. He's deadly accurate. The numbers show it, but it also goes to elite offensive play calling by Ben Johnson. They've got everything. Elite O-line, efficient quarterback. By the way, Amon-Ra St. Brown, top 7 receiver, I think, in the National Football League. Jamison Williams, who I said is going to be the X factor for this offense. First year of his career, that is, he isn't either suspended or injured. And dear God, the speed on this kid, which I loved him out of Alabama, you're seeing it. Be it that breakaway speed down the sideline. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, lightning and thunder, thunder and lightning. Sam Laporta, the tight end. Now, I do have concerns about this defense, but if nothing else, their saving grace is they have one of the 5 best pass rushers on planet Earth in Aiden Hutchinson. So, and by the way, Aiden Hutchinson, they don't win that Rams game without him getting pressure on a big third down in Stafford. He was able to get to Geno Smith at times throughout the night. I have questions about the defense. I do. This team's ready to go every single Sunday. It's one of the smartest offensive coaching staffs in the NFL. I mean, the trick play was, the risk on that spot, running down the red zone was run to perfection. St. Brown to Goff. There's not much not to like about this team. They're healthy. They're playing exceptional football on the opposite side. The Detroit Lions are the second best team in the National Football League. Again, spoiler alert, at number 1, it is the world champion Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, once again, like the Lions have been number 2 all season long thus far, the Chiefs have been number 1 all season long thus far, and here's why. So let's see. Kansas City is on, I believe, a 10-game winning streak at this point. Yeah, my math serves me correctly. So win their last 2 games at the end of last year's regular season. You beat an 11-win Miami team. You beat an 11-win Buffalo Bills team on the road, who were favored. You beat a 13-win Baltimore Ravens team on the road, who were favored. You beat the San Francisco 49ers, who have a better roster in the Super Bowl. They also were favored. You then beat the Baltimore Ravens again. You own them psychologically at this point in Arrowhead. You knock off, listen, I know the Bengals have 1 win. It's still Joe Burrow, who's had plenty of success against the Chiefs. Mahomes plays poorly, and they still beat the Cincinnati Bengals. The week after that, I said, listen, Atlanta is exactly the teams like I mentioned. I still think they're a talented roster with a good defense, and you're better situationally. And again, letting other teams beat themselves, which Atlanta did in that spot, particularly in their 4th down play calling. And then last week, again, against a beat-up Chargers team, finding a way to win week after week. The prime teams in the AFC the last couple of years, at least how we perceived, Buffalo, Baltimore, Cincinnati, LA Chargers, they beat all of them. Some of them multiple times. And so Mahomes is not playing great football. He has top 5 in touchdown passes. It's not like the end of the world. Kansas City has had the hardest schedule in the NFL through 4 weeks. Now, again, my big concern for them, Rashee Rice, potentially done for the season. Hollywood Brown, potentially done for the season. Here's what I know. Brett Veach isn't Jerry Jones. He's going to be aggressive in the trade deadline. Kansas City's going to go get somebody, and this team is going to continue their quest for a three-peat. The Kansas City Chiefs, once again, it's a little anticlimactic again for Bryce's Best 10, but they are the best team in the National Football League. Let's look at our top 10. All in one box here. So from 1 to 10, let's just go 10 to 1, but let's go backwards. I got the Packers, the Steelers, the 49ers, the Texans, the Chargers, Buffalo, Baltimore, Minnesota, Detroit, and of course, the world champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Check some comments after I get a drink of water. Love that semi week. We've had so much turnover, but at 1 and 2, and listen, those are my Super Bowl picks. KC out of the AFC, Detroit out of the NFC. They've been 1 and 2 all year long. Even Detroit lost their game to Tampa Bay. I'm like, hey, move the ball in Tampa. This is not the standings. If this was the standings, we'd just have Kansas City and Minnesota. That'd be kind of boring, right? I mean, what do we do? Do you want me to get up my phone and look at ESPN and, show you the NFL standings? I mean, come on. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to go on eye tests. We're here to go on numbers, on all of these things. Injuries. Here we go. Oh, man, listen. Jeff, let me tell you something. Find you a person in your life. If you're a single person looking for a life partner, find you somebody who loves you like Jeff loves Brock Purdy. Listen, let me put it this way, Jeff, because Jeff is like, because Jeff's in the comments is just going crazy on me, like, man, Purdy was amazing. Here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers was amazing against this defense. I didn't mean for the camera to roll there, to rock. I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't that good. Now, Purdy's better than Aaron, I think, at this point. I'm more than comfortable saying that. He's been more productive. What do you want me to do? If you're not great against this New England Patriots defense, you are an objectively bad quarterback. Now, you could say that about Joe Burrow. I get that, but Burrow has enough of a history. By the way, from week 2 on, Joe Burrow's been excellent. The problem with Cincinnati has been their god-awful defense. Burrow and Chase have done their job. I'm not sure coaching and certainly the defense has done theirs. So, listen. And listen, Jeff makes a fair point. Lions defense looked horrible. It did, and that's a concern. It is. I don't know. It's that if Detroit goes down the playoffs, that's going to be either that or they get pressure on Goff. But my thing is, I don't think they will often because they have the best offensive line in pro football. And by the way, I think by a pretty healthy margin. God, they're wet. They're loaded too. They're well coached. They can do whatever they want on offense. If you want to throw the ball deep, if you want to throw the intermediate routes, but with Amon St. Brown, with Sam Laporte, you want to run the football. If you want to be a ground and pound team, use David Montgomery. If you want to be more of a speed team, use Jahmyr Gibbs. It's an elite football team in every sense of the word. I do have concerns about the defense, but if nothing else, Aiden Hutchinson. Like you could say, well, what about Dallas? Yeah, they have a superstar, and they're not the best defense. We all know Micah Parsons today is not as good as Aiden Hutchinson. He's not as productive. Certainly not as consistently as Hutchinson. Had to get a little Cowboy dig in there. Especially Steelers-Cowboys week. You kidding me? All right, before we get out of here, we got a game this week featuring, I need to make sure we get the graphic here because I do not want to miss out on that. By the way, again, I mentioned this in the Pete Rose segment. Houston out. Houston Astros out of the playoffs. The Tigers. This sometimes, man, which it's hard to call Houston better than Detroit. Didn't they have the same record? I picked Houston to win this series in 3 games in this best of 3 wildcard series. A lot of times, man, it's just get in, and if you're playing exceptional baseball, anything can happen. The last 2 National League champions have been 6 seeds. Phillies, Diamondbacks. Now I know it's American League, but still, it's analogous. So the Detroit Tigers in the playoffs for the first time in a decade to the ALDS. Are they playing the Yankees? No, they're playing the Guardians. Okay. Well, that'll be a pitcher's duel throughout that series. And then Kansas City Royals, so I did pick to sweep the Baltimore Orioles. They are up 1-0 in the 5th inning in Baltimore. Orioles got to win to keep their season alive. Royals looking to sweep. Pulling for the Mets. Like I said, listen, as I say about the Mets, then I'll get to my Buccaneers Falcons predictions. As I say about the Mets all the time, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Mets and the Red Sox, we both share mutual, just a loathing for, and that is the disgusting New York Yankees and their fans. Ugh, they're the worst. They're the worst. So definitely pumped for the Mets to get the sweep tonight against the Milwaukee Brewers. Now you talk about Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose. It was a great play to at first base with 2 outs to give the Mets an opportunity. They were down in that game. I think it was, what was this, the 5th or 6th inning, to put 6 runs on the board, 5 or 6 runs on the board, something like that, to give themselves a healthy cushion to be able to win that first game 1. Again, the Mets are a little bit, to a lesser degree, like the Tigers of the NL. I mean, ever since Grimace showed up at Citi Field, it's been a different ball club, man. I know they got Mr. and Mrs. Met, but I mean, go ahead and make Grimace the official mascot. What are you waiting for? Or at least the co-mascot. All right, back to football. So we got a game tomorrow night featuring an NFC South matchup, rather. Here we go. -1.5. So, God, Atlanta can be frustrating sometimes because you see the talent. You see Kirk Cousins and Drake London and Bijan Robinson, who I freaking love, Kyle Pitts, all of these guys. What's so darn frustrating I don't know if there's an injury going on. I don't know what it is, but Arthur Smith took a lot of crap last year for, why wouldn't you give the ball to Bijan Robinson? Arthur Smith and the Steelers now doing a great job. They still don't give the ball to Bijan Robinson. It's Tyler Allgeier's a really productive back. He's not as talented as this kid. So it's the play calling offensively has been very, very odd for the Atlanta Falcons. And their defense, again, struggled at times to stop the run against the New Orleans Saints on Sunday. For the Tampa Bay Bucs, I don't know. They've been pretty good. I mean, I thought about potentially putting them and replacing the Packers at number 10 on Bryson's best 10. That, listen, they blow out the Washington Commanders. I get it's week one. Rookie quarterbacks historically aren't very good in week one, but they blow out Washington in week one. A week ago against, again, a beat-up Philly team, you blow out the Eagles. They beat the Lions on the road, only team to have to give Detroit one single blemish. Baker's playing out of his mind right now this season. Now, Atlanta's defense is better than Philadelphia's. Philly's got one of the worst defenses in the NFL. As I trust Atlanta's coaching staff, particularly obviously with Raheem Morris, knowing his history with the Rams. I certainly could trust him more than Vic Fangio with the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's a short week. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I think the over-under on this one is 43.5. I could see it being some of that ballpark. I'm going to take ever so slightly over in this spot. Atlanta's played a lot of home games. They're about to go on a big road trip. Like, this is a for the lead in the division type of spot. This would be a classic Bryson's bleak bet game if this game were played on a Sunday. And maybe I feel different if both teams had extra time to prepare. I'm going to hesitantly go with Atlanta to win and cover it by a final score of 24-20. I just trust their offensive pieces more. And Tampa Bay's not very good on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't show on Sunday. Jalen Hurts has been a turnover machine, and no A.J. Brown or Lane Johnson or Davante Smith. This Falcons team is far more talented than what the Eagles were able to present on Sunday against Tampa Bay. So I'm going to go with Atlanta by a final score of 24-20 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay fans may think I hate them because I had them going like 7-10 because I thought the loss of Dave Canales would be devastating. It thus far hasn't been, and Baker's been great. Kudos to him. But pick integrity. I did pick the Falcons to win this division. This is a really, really big game in the NFC South. It's October, first game of October, but you still don't want to go down 2 games to a team that's going to have the tiebreaker over you. So I'll go Atlanta, 24-20. And again, their 2 losses against Pittsburgh and what might as well have been a road game with how many terrible towels we're in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and you lost to the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, and you had a shot to win. Now, one could say, yeah, but they could be 1-3 if not for an unbelievable deep field goal by Young Hoku to win it. I get that, but still, it's a talented team. I'm going to buy into that. I love Raheem Morris, and I'm going to go Atlanta to win this sucker 24-20. All right. That's all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. Again, earlier show than usual at 5 Eastern. We'll be back at our normally scheduled time on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Of course, be sure to like, share, comment, and please take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. It helps the channel grow exponentially. If you have not subscribed, it only takes a couple seconds. Like I said, please hit that big red subscribe button down there, and boom, you're part of the Carving It Up family. And if you have subscribed, please tell your friends about it. Please tell your family about it. Please tell everybody you know about it, except for your sleeping cat. Even if your cat's awake, by the way, if he or she has got a lot to say, as Nealon has, he'll give me these moves, but he is just bam, and he's talking like a person almost. It's unbelievable. Listen, he could be a talkative little fella, depending on his move. Just as importantly, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts. Check us out on the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. Patrick Brown, who just put out some new pieces on the Philadelphia Eagles, he put out a really good piece on Derrick Rose, paying tribute to the great D Rose, former league MVP, youngest MVP in history after he obviously retired last week. Definitely be sure to check that out. All those articles are on the Grid Network website. As in terms of our other content creators, check us out on all podcast platforms and here on YouTube on the Grid Network. Check out our incredible content, man. We got some great folks over there or over here that are doing some incredible work. All right, I'll see you on Friday. Reaction to what's going to be sure to be a fun Thursday night game. Maybe we'll have some ALDS and NLDS predictions. Maybe some college football stuff, the Vol View, NFL predictions. This is going to be a fun show. I can't wait. So I'll see you then. Please be sure to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please, please, please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. Doesn't matter where you lean, right, left, center. This is an issue that impacts every single one of us as Americans on a day-to-day basis. And no matter what anybody tries to tell you, oh, it's not a problem. Oh, there's only one solution to the problem. Both are BS. Both are not true. It's a huge problem that needs a number of detailed, nuanced solutions to solve it. And especially this being an election year, if there's anybody, I don't care, either side of the aisle that doesn't show a sense of urgency to address it, either vote them out or vote against them, because we've got to get this addressed as soon as possible and elect the best and brightest lawmakers to put ourselves in position to address this. So I will see y'all on Friday. Listen, this is the best month of the sports year. It really, really is. October, baseball, NBA comes back in a few weeks. College football, NFL are almost at midseason. Come on now. This is as good as it gets. So I'll see y'all on Friday. Stay safe out there. God bless y'all. Peace out. Happy birthday, Dad. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.